we're continuing our pledge campaign series of the E's of Giving, and so I'm grateful to our pledge committee for coming up with our E words. And so each Sunday we focus on a principle of the E, and we also apply it to something great that our community does. So our first Sunday we talked about extraordinary, and we applied it to our youth church. And our second week we explored the word embracing, and we talked about service, the service that the church does. And last week we talked about empowering, and we focused on the education of the church. And so today we're focusing on the word enduring, and applying it to the great legacy of this church, the recognition that this church has been here for a very long time, and we want it to be here for a very long time to come. I was even thinking when Rachel was speaking, how long have you been coming to this church, Rachel? At least 15 years. So how many people have been a part of this church for 5 or more years? Okay, 10 or more years? 15 or more years? 20 or more years? And even probably some 30 or more years. Yeah, one of the things that we brought today that's kind of cool is just some old photo albums, church newsletters, and there's even a picture in an archival book of the first technical church service in the mid-1960s at a community center. And so it's great to know that we've been part of something that's been going on for so long just in this individual church, right? Isn't that awesome? I'll be talking about someone who's been a part of the church for a long time a little later in the message. I also love this idea of enduring, and enduring as a principle. And so I want to share about that today by telling a few stories. And while I'm telling them, I want to invite you to ask yourself the question that in life, what really lasts? You know, if anything, in life, what really lasts? The first story I want to share with you, I read recently in the New York Magazine, and it's the story of Yasuo Takamatsu, who lost his wife, Yuko, 5 years ago in the great earthquake and tsunami that took place in Japan. Yuko worked for a bank, and all the employees went up to the top of the building, but it didn't help them. They were all swept away, and almost all of them believed to have passed away. Yasuo shares walking to the scene each day and seeing the bodies and hoping to find his wife, and yet almost giving thanks at the end of each day that he hadn't found her as well. And at 50 years old, he took on an interesting hobby. He took on the hobby of diving. So in the middle of his age, he decided to focus and learn to dive so that he could spend his days going underwater to try and search for his wife. He shared with the journalist, "I have no choice but to keep looking." And to this day, more than 100 dives this gentleman has taken in honor of his wife. Someone heard his story and wrote a song in honor of his wife and in honor of him, and the journalist asked Yasuo if it brings back memories of his wife. His reply was, "It does not bring back memories because it is not something that I forgot." It's a sad story, right? But a loving story, no? Enduring, for sure, right? And it makes you wonder in this world, what really lasts? What in life really endures? The second story I want to share with you this morning is the story of the great UCLA basketball coach John Wooden and his wife Nan, who were married for 53 years and studied Wooden some. He's one of the most meticulous people I've ever seen, and so I know not just being with the woman he loved, but all the things that they must have done together every day must have been so important to him. And after 53 years of marriage, Nan passed away, and Wooden was devastated. But he couldn't help but continue to communicate with her. And so one of the things that he famously did is that every day he wrote Nan a letter. He sealed it and put it on their bed on which he no longer slept. And as the years grew past, there was a huge pile of these love letters on their bed. Several years after Nan's passing, John finally agreed with an author to write a book about their romance and their lessons about relationships. And the author showed up to the front door and wouldn't open the door with tears in his eyes, and he said, "I'm just not ready yet." Sad story, right? But a loving story, no?
Yes.
Enduring? Absolutely enduring. It makes you wonder in life what really lasts, what truly endures. A final story to share with you is one of the many stories told by Viktor Frankl, who I mentioned earlier we're going to start to teach a class on October 11th. And Frankl was a psychologist, and he championed a kind of psychology he called logotherapy. And his theory was that where Freud argued that we human beings are driven by wish fulfillments, and where Alfred Adler argued that we human beings are driven by complexes of superiority or inferiority. For Frankl, he believed that we human beings are driven fundamentally by a desire for meaning and truth in our lives. Frankl got to prove this in his own life because as a young man with the manuscript for his logotherapy in his pocket, he had the unfortunate fact of being a Jew in Germany during World War II, and he and his whole family were abducted and taken prisoner and sent to concentration camps. And there Frankl endured great suffering for a couple of years. And he tells one particular story that's very powerful to me of being drug out with pickaxes to work one day in the freezing cold and working so hard, and these men were working so hard that it wasn't a surprise if from time to time one of them would drop dead from exhaustion or from the freezing that they were being put through. And on one particular day, a gentleman that was next to Frankl working made the sarcastic point of, "Oh, if our wives could only see us now." And Frankl shared immediately he was struck with the presence of his wife. He could see her face, and even more, he could feel her beholding him. It was a mystical experience in which he felt beheld, loved, seen, and at one with that great connection of love that he and his wife had cultivated over time. He shares, "A thought transfixed me. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth that love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world may still know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. In a position of utter desolation, when man cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist in enduring his sufferings in the right way, an honorable way, in such a position man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfillment. For the first time in my life, I was able to understand the meaning of the words that angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory." So a beautiful mystical experience, and at the same time what Frankl didn't know when he was having that experience is that his wife had already tragically been murdered, as well as his entire family that had been abducted by that time. So a sad story, but a loving story, right? And an enduring story. And yet it makes you wonder what really lasts in this life, what truly endures. I think someone more pessimistic may look at all three of these stories and think all these guys are a little wacko. Why spend your days searching for someone that isn't with us anymore? Why spend your days writing letters to someone who can't read them? Why spend any of your time when your life is so set for you in a state of suffering, trying to imagine or think about something else? And it's so easy in our lives to become apathetic, to become downtrodden in the idea that life ends and it's all going to be over soon and it's probably all meaningless. I know I've been there before. It's hard at times to recognize that there is in truth something enduring and powerful that does go on. It may not always be in our bodies, which seem to pass away, but it's in those connections. It's in those memories which seem to take place not in time, but almost outside of time, in a way that we can retrieve and experience them at any given moment when we remember that primordial truth of who we are. I believe that there is something enduring in this life. Something that we have, however, have to move beyond the temporal to see. Because I think the person that would be pessimistic of these three gentlemen is probably someone who, as opposed to praising the divine and the sacred in their lives, is much more to worship that all-holy to-do list of getting things done during the day. Has probably set their lives on the temporal aspects of making money, of fulfilling the chores, of trying to make something of one's self, which nothing wrong with any of that. And yet, when we don't take that time to honor the most sacred connections that we have, our legacy, the legacy that made us who we are, and the legacy that we will leave to life around us, we can get really caught up in that kind of temporal existence. Our quote of the day, our quote of the soap. Everyone have been staying clean with the soaps. How many of you use them? I've got them. Okay, good? All right. Our quote today is from Eric Butterworth, who said, "Life's inmost secret is the divine pattern in which you can only really know when you are giving yourself in service." One more time. Life's inmost secret is the divine pattern in which you can only really know when you are giving yourself in service. It brings up to me an interesting paradox in life, and it's the paradox that I can only truly know myself when I move beyond myself. I only truly become myself when I identify with more than who I think I am. Do you find that true in your life? I have found who I really am, not just in my body or in my self-awareness, but in the people that I love, in the spiritual communities I've been able to be a part of, in the teachings and wisdom that I've been able to receive and hopefully practice to some degree in my life. That's how I've learned who I am. And so I think we become who we are, just like Butterworth says, through service, but it's through, again, bringing that identity of who we are beyond the temporal aspects of ourselves to the more enduring and permanent parts of ourselves. So not just being in service to others, but in loving someone unconditionally, in being a part of a spiritual community like this one that was here before some of us got here and will hopefully be here long after all of us are gone. These are things that can endure over time, that when we learn to identify with, can help us feel that we have a longer time than just the years that seem to be wishing by, right? I love something the philosopher Karl Jaspers said. He said, "What man is, he has become through that cause which he has made his own." One more time. What man is, he has become through that cause which he has made his own. What cause have you made your own? What is your cause for living? And I would argue that that is who you are. It may be family. It may be this magnificent teaching. It may be just being present each and every day to whatever God would present for you or whatever God would present through you. I think it's a powerful thing to think about, how we evolve from being temporal beings in our lives to being more enduring beings in our lives. One of the most classic science fiction storylines of all time, and I don't know how many science fiction fans there are in here, it's the idea that Earthlings have so ruined their environment that they have to go colonize another planet or create a space colony in order to survive. Have we all seen a movie or read a book like that before? And usually it's that dastardly 1% that gets to go, and we're all stuck here. It's really terrible. And then sometimes they flip the storyline, and it's like an alien entities have come here to take our habitat and destroy us. But then they start by destroying the 1% first, and we all cheer at that. We realize we're in trouble too, however it goes. And not that that storyline could never come true, but to me, there is a great analogy for our spiritual lives in that. In that in real life, we are all born into a temporal life, into a temporal body spacesuit, we might call it. And as wonderful as it is, in its environment, it gets worn down, and it won't be forever. This beautiful being you see before you in physical form will not be beautiful forever. it will fade away. And so it's up to us to live a temporal life and just accept it to a degree, but also it's up to us to take this soul that we are and to learn to bring it in to bodies of understanding, bodies of connection that are enduring, that will endure. Those connections with people we love, those virtues and values we have practiced that hopefully we were an example in, that others will take on. Those, again, those eternal memories that we may call past, but are always available to us, always retrievable with a deep awareness of our connections and our beingness. It's an interesting question. How can I move from being a temporal being into being an everlasting being? How can I see myself and what I do not just making a difference in the moment, but enduring throughout time, to deepen, to grow, to expand? As I was saying, for me, one of the things that really goes on in my life, or that I see as enduring, is this church. I love the spiritual community here. I love that I've been able to give and invest so much into it, and I love that it's given me more than I've been able to give to it in so many wonderful ways. And I love that it's something that will be here after I'm gone. It includes that realization that I'm an interim minister and you're an interim member. And it includes a little bit of sadness too, because we recognize all the people that have sat in these literal chairs in many cases who are no longer with us, and yet they endure as us, don't they? I was thinking of our wonderful Reverend Margie, who is still with us. She's right here with the red hair over there in the fourth row. She's one of my favorite representatives of this church, and one of the things that Reverend Margie has is she served as a ministerial presence in this church for over 25 years, I believe. She, in her initial working life, worked for 25 years as a librarian in the Los Alamitos School District, but she always had an interest in philosophy and religion, and something she told me once that always inspired me. She says, sometimes people will ask me, do you believe in God? And my response is, define God. And I always like that. It helps in terms of conversation. It also reminds me that I do believe that librarians should rule the world. They should be in these spaces. But with that kind of statement, define God, it shows so much of who we are as a church. And I'm talking our center right here, because Reverend Margie so represents that to me of I'm not going to tell you what it is, but let's have a good conversation about it. You show me your God, I'll show you mine. And let's see if we can make a better God, an understanding of what life is together. And some of my favorite stories about Reverend Margie are people telling me that they came to this church for the first time in the late 90s or early 2000s, and they met this very nice lady with fiery red hair, and she was really, really cool. And then they sat down and they were shocked when she was the one that got up and gave the sermon. And I love that lesson about our church too, because there's not a real hierarchy here. We're all who we are, and the wisdom doesn't come from one person or one place. It's something that we collect and gather, and I get to be the representative of it when we share. But you see all the other wonderful people that take the stage too, and the people that you talk to that are sitting next to you and greet you when you come in. The wisdom is a collective here. And there's a great lesson about life, about not trying to be better than anyone else, but about being who we are and recognizing that the wisdom we have is pretty cool, pretty deep, pretty advanced, and it's part of how we endure when we choose to share it. Viktor Frankl tells a story about working with a woman who kind of has that apathetic understanding. I know that I go there from time to time, that life is meaningless. It's just it's just a bunch of, you're born, you live a few years, and you die, and nobody remembers, and you're just dirt. Anyone ever go there? I get there sometimes. I was reading the story, and I was reminded of a song that I used to laugh about because there was a hidden truth to it from the 90s from a punk rock band. They were called the Vandals. And the song was called Flowers Are Pretty. They were punk rock, and so there was a lot of curse words in the lyrics, so you just kind of bear with me. I'm not going to say them, but I'll probably infer them. So it goes something like this. It says, children are lovely before they get ugly and learn to do bad stuff. Flowers are pretty before they get itty and rot and turn to dust. I heard that life is a wheel, and you can't make it stop. If you try, it'll flatten your head. It's a circle of it. We're in the middle of it. But soon we'll all be dead. No amens out there from the audience? All be dead like everybody else that's ever lived before. The things you make fall to the floor. And nobody knows how hard you tried. It's been that way since the start of time. There was a caveman that did some amazing things, but nobody here gives up you know what. And in 1,000 years, they'll feel the same towards all the things you've done. But they do it in a cheerful song, so I like that better. But I don't know about you, but every once in a while I can go to that place a little bit because I get attached to the temporal. I get upset that this body and my voice, and maybe people won't remember me the way that I want them to. But then there's that reminder of something deeper there as well. And Frankel, when he's working with this woman, he decides to ask her, who do you think in your life that you know who lived the most meaningful life, who had the most meaningful existence? And she thinks a while and she says, well, I guess our family doctor growing up. He was someone who saved a lot of lives. He was there for a lot of people. He delivered a lot of children. He was always available. Well, Frankel asked her, well, what if everyone that he helped was no longer grateful for what he had done? Would his life still have meaning? Yes, she says, it remains. It would remain. Well, what if everybody he helped forgot that he had helped them? They didn't remember his name. Yeah, she answered, it remains. The meaning remains. But what about when all of those people who he helped and even their children all pass away? What then? And her response was, it remains. It remains. And I think that's a good question for each of us when it comes to our choices, it comes to our actions, it comes to our connections. Where can we say to ourselves, it remains. It remains. For that's who you are, or that's your best hope of remaining in this life. We may be forgotten in some ways, and yet the enduring is that collective commonality we all share. We all contribute to it like a good conversation that hopefully will never end. It goes on and on and on. However, it's up to us to take that time, a little bit of time each day if we can, to honor the temporal life that we live in, the swishing by of time, but also to take that time to honor, to meditate, to contemplate, to be aware even of those sad times because they don't seem to be present in our lives the way they once were, but to honor them as the sacred, never-ending and always available. And as we do that, we begin to nurture our enduring self. We begin to endure in our lives, and it starts showing up in all that we do. To close with some ancient wisdom from the great Lao Tzu in his Tao Te Ching. Returning to the root, be completely empty. Be perfectly serene. The 10,000 things arise together, and their arising is their return. Now they flower, and flowering sink homeward, returning to the root. The return to the root is peace. Peace to accept what must be, to know what endures. And that knowledge is wisdom. Without it, ruin, disorder. To know what endures is to be open-hearted, magnanimous, regal, blessed, following the Tao, the way that endures forever. The body comes to its ending, but there is nothing to fear. And so just with a prayerful moment of closing, if you so choose to join me, let us just simply recognize together that which endures, the very presence of life that has always been and always will be. Recognizing that each of us, in a sense, is a spark of that infiniteness, an expression of the primordial, a creative being, not a created one, a happening being, not a happened one. Let us get in touch with that part of ourselves that is eternally in action, that is eternally creative, that has never proved to us to stop in any way, shape, or form. That is the ongoing self. That is the enduring self. And as we bring awareness and attention of what it is into our most sacred causes, it becomes them. In our most sacred connections, it becomes them. In moments of stillness, we are reminded, we are confirmed, and we indeed embody that deep and grand awareness, ever available at any time, which always endures. And so it is. So thanks for your time, everyone, this morning. Great to see you. Happy Sunday.